I would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. It's the Cult-Worthy Cinema Podcast. I'm your host, Antonio, and we are kicking off Animation April for the third year in a row now. And kicking it off like we did last year, I'm with my two favorite anime, video game, animation podcasters. I've got Josh Skaar of Talking SMAC and SLADE of Game Club Pod, as many other pods as well. But guys, we're doing it again. Cult-Worthy Anime. Kicking off Animation April. I'm so excited, so welcome back.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us back. It was a blast last year. Can't wait for this year.
I just can't believe that it's been a year, like this week, a year since Josh Skaar introduced me to the film Your Name and literally broke my soul with anime. I didn't think it was possible. And then we got to do Suzume on Talking SMAC. And again, like I was broken again, not as deeply as with Your Name, but
why do you make me care about a three-legged chair?
Right. Why do you make me care about like these waifu girls that just make me feel funny feelings I've never felt before? And then SLADE, of course, you did Sing a Bit of Harmony last year, which really got me into like the kind of more bubblegummy kind of anime. Like, I think I said this on the Suzume episode. It's you guys that got me into subscribing to Crunchyroll, and a year later, I'm still paying for it. Like, I'm still occasionally hopping on and watching stuff. And I'm not saying I'm a full convert yet, but after this second episode of Animation April doing this anime stuff, I'm getting closer, especially with the movies that we brought today.
So I know you're more of a movie person, but have you given My Dress Up Darling a chance yet?
No. But I might. I don't know. Summer break is coming up. I'll have to
It's a 12-episode series. I would strongly recommend it. It is a lot of fun.
It's a great time to be had. It's just a lovely little rom-com slice of life. And it's wholesome. It's hard to not
Crunchyroll, not a sponsor, but could be.
Could be. and SLADE, this is one of the things that got me interested. When I was looking for your film that you brought to the table today, I realized that it was a series as well. So was it a film first, or was it a series first and then a film?
Okay, so this kind of goes back to why I picked it. Which, do you want to go ahead and say what it is?
You pronounce it better than I do.
Oh, yeah, sure. It's Jujutsu Kaisen 0, which is a prequel movie for the series. So season 1 came out. This prequel movie came out and was in theaters. And then, season 2 comes on. But what I was wondering if I could finally, have the anime bug bite you by making you watch the prequel movie and then hopping into the series after that.
Well, we'll get to that conversation because you're number 2 on the list. I don't want to give away too many spoilers early in the episode. We have an order. We're going to stick to it. We're going to start with Josh bringing his film this year. And before we start, I like that we all picked very different films than the ones we did last year. Like last year, I went with like a real kind of sci-fi, early 80s kind of throwback. I went the retro route.
It was a very fun B-action movie.
B-action movie, Star Wars ripoff, what have you. And then Skaar brought like this very emotional yet charming animated rom-com essentially with some sci-fi aspects. And then SLADE just brought like the full-on bubblegum with the sci-fi aspects as well. And then we all took a little bit darker turn this year. And I kind of liked it because it's going to show my listeners who maybe aren't too familiar with anime motion pictures as well as myself, the idea that there are different vibes and feelings to these movies, that they're not all just bubblegum and sci-fi. They also cover broader topics. And I think Skaar's is the perfect example because just like Your Name, it feels like a movie that could only be told through the medium of animation, but it's a real movie. So I'm going to go ahead and let you jump into that.
So I'm going to give a little backstory on this first. Personal backstory. This is actually the first anime I ever remember seeing.
Wow.
Almost literally 20 years to the day, because I was 18 when I saw this. I saw it at my girlfriend at the time's house. We dated just before prom. We're currently in late March, so this is around the time we would have been dating. And she invited me over for a family movie night. And I didn't know at the time what movie they had selected, so I got there a little late, and I got in on this scene where these two gentlemen are talking to this older woman, and all of a sudden chaos ensues and they're transported back in time, and they're filming her life as she is telling it to them through this documentary, and they're filming her life while being told about her life in a documentary in an interview. And I was just like, what the hell is happening? I have no idea what's going on. And I have had this movie in my brain for so long, and I think I just found out what it was actually called within the last few years.
Nice.
I just, something clicked, and I was like, what was that movie I watched with Katie with her family? So I just did a Google search of anime documentary team records a person's life, and found the description, found out it's called Millennium Actress, and immediately tried to find it on Amazon so I could watch it again and see if what I remembered was accurate. And the only physical copy that I could find on Amazon was a DVD of an original press for $175.
Right.
Woo.
I was like, nope, I guess I will never know what this
Nope.
movie is actually about. But thankfully it
And then it just shows up on Tubi.
it eventually got a physical re-release in Blu-ray, and I got a steelbook edition of it at my local Target, actually. And I watched it, and I was just like, this is not what I remember at all. It's much.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, from what I remembered, it was more about I thought the lady was telling the crew about her life story, like almost like Titanic. And I didn't catch on that she was an actress because I missed the opening bit. So when they go back and they're revisiting all of her previous roles, I missed that context that they were talking about her career as an actress. And apparently she's just this noted, just phenomenal Meryl Streep type in this animated universe. And this is a normal thing that happens, I guess, in this universe as well, that someone starts sharing stories about their life and you get transported back with them to experience those moments with them. As 18-year-old Josh was viewing this movie, he thought that this was something insane that was happening, and they're just like, let's go with it. And they were recording the movie as it was happening, or recorded the experiences as they were happening. And that was kind of where I always was like, what was going on in this movie? Because I didn't realize at the time that they were expecting this to happen. And they even take a moment in the movie to be where the actress is like, are you okay with me telling you this way? And like, yeah, no, this is perfect. This is awesome. And I was astounded at the fact that they knew this was going to happen. And just some of the shenanigans that happen later, where the guy's like, the documentarian is actually just a big fanboy who knew her back in the day. Those are nice little touches that I didn't remember at the time. But it's a very different movie from what I thought I had seen when I was 18.
I mean, so first of all, like, you know, I'm not a huge anime guy, but the few anime filmmakers that I am familiar with and actually respect, this guy who did this film is one of them, Satoshi Kon. I've seen all of his films before I even really knew who he was. Started off with Perfect Blue. Like Perfect Blue, I remember seeing in the late 90s because I heard that it was a heavy influence on Darren Aronofsky movies, which it totally was. And then this was his next one. And then he did Tokyo Godfathers, which was another great movie. It's like a Japanese Christmas movie, but with a heart. And then he finished it off before he passed away with the film Paprika, which I think might be one of my favorite animes of all time. And when we talk about influential stuff again, a lot of people say that it was the influence for Christopher Nolan's Inception, where you are diving into people's dreams. But there's a theme that Satoshi Kon uses throughout his movies, and that is the theme of being an obsessive cinephile. In each of his films, there is a character, like in this case, it's the documentarian, and even the actress herself. What's her name? Chiyoko?
Yeah. Chiyoko Fujiwara.
they are so fascinated by the art of filmmaking and the art of being a film appreciator. Each one of these films, even though they're about different things, really focus around the world of filmmaking and the scenes behind it, the producers, the actors, the directors, the seedy side of it in Perfect Blue. But then in Paprika, there's a detective who wanted to be a filmmaker. And so his dreams are all movie related and film related. So I love that he carries on that theme in all 4 of his movies about being like a cinema appreciator. And this movie was the perfect one. This is one I was the least familiar with, because I only saw it once. This was my next revision of it. And my viewpoint from being the movie guy in this group is this is like if Charlie Kaufman wrote an anime. That's what it feels like. You know, the Being John Malkovich guy, he also wrote the film adaptation with Nicolas Cage, where there is like a metaphysical break where reality and fantasy merge. And that's how this film feels. Like when you're talking about the documentarian and his cameraman being transported into the story this actress is regaling and doing it through like recognizable moments in Japanese cinema, from samurai films to monster movies to sci-fi epics as the time progresses. It's like a treat for people that appreciate cinema as well, because they get to follow this timeline as she has like this sentimental key, and you're finding out what the key is for and why it disappeared and why it's returned. So many great plot progressions and so many great, just perfect beats of emotion, right? That really you feel from her telling her story, and then you feel from the documentarian who's listening, and he's like the biggest fanboy. He's just like always on edge. It's like watching a telenovela. He's just all dramatic. I just loved every second of it. So that's my piece on it.
I really enjoyed it. I honestly, the cameraman and the producer are my 2 favorite characters in the whole movie.
Yeah, they're great.
Because I think it's such a, like you said, Antonio, it's such a cool way to tell the story. Like with them just kind of planted in to the movie as it was going on. They stick out like a sore thumb at times, you know, with their modern clothing and everything.
Yeah.
But some of their running commentary along with the narrative as it goes along is great. Like I really enjoyed it. I was actually surprised as it's not really that old of a movie, but as old as it is for an anime movie, how good the dub was.
Mm-hmm.
I was extremely surprised how good the voice acting is, because older anime is notorious for having bad English dub.
Well, I mean, also this was pushed in film festival circuits and a decent wide release theatrically in the States, just like Perfect Blue was and Tokyo Godfathers and Paprika was. Like Paprika has an amazing dub too. So I feel like before streaming became like the comfortable medium for people to watch animated films on, if they were going to take the time and the effort to put something out theatrically back in like the early 2000s, they were going to give it a good job. I mean, if you think about watching some of the older dubs of Studio Ghibli movies, and then when they started taking off, they go back and redub them. I think Kiki's Delivery Service is a perfect example. Like there's an earlier dub that's kind of shoddy, and then they redid it with Kirsten Dunst and Phil Hartman and stuff, and then it's much better. I think that's when people started paying more attention to doing a better version for the theatrical releases.
Oh, for sure. And like I said, I love the storytelling. I love the concept of it. I don't know why, but it just kept sticking in my head the whole time. And I know I've talked about this movie before. Big Fish.
Love Big Fish.
Yeah.
So, you know, in that movie, and this kind of, it's one of those things you just wonder if somebody watched it while they were writing the script for Big Fish, because, you know, you see the dad stories and everything they're going through, and then they turn out to actually be real and part of the plot. And you kind of have the same thing here with when you finally get to the point where the producer of the documentary, he was working on the film set back when she was a lot younger and he was younger. And it's like, how if we came into this loop where everything is actually being tied back in and pulled together?
That's a great point, because it makes me also wonder too, is we can only assume that we are watching this film through the narrative viewpoint of him. So in my mind, what it feels like is you're also watching his, let's say, mental movie house, playing the stories the way that he's interpreting them, because he also has memories of them when he was younger working with her. And so he vicariously, the cameraman and everything around them is existing through his viewpoint almost as if he is the Albert Finney character from Big Fish. No, yeah. And that's why I said like it also has a Charlie Kaufman feel where it kind of breaks that metaphysical barrier of what's fantastical and what's reality, which you can do in animation so easily, and it's the perfect medium for it, 100%. Jean-Pierre Jeunet, the French filmmaker who did Amélie, it makes me feel very similar to those feelings where there's romantic whimsy, but also there is danger and there is despair and there is heartbreak, but you're never broken from the fantastical whimsy of the romance of it. Like, even though no one's really romantically connected in the story, you feel the emotions between them. And also, she's searching for a long-lost love to the point where she doesn't even remember his face. Like, she's chasing a dream and a memory that she's so obsessed with. By the time she gets fame and by the time she gets recognition and notoriety, she can't even remember what it is she's looking for. Like, there's some heartbreak to that, and that also is emotionally gripping.
Jean-Pierre Jeunet's follow-up to Amélie was A Very Long Engagement.
Very Long Engagement. That's the one I'm thinking about, where it's Audrey Tautou, who played Amélie, who she loses her fiance in World War I and spends decades looking for him. And it's the same thing where it's like, after all that time looking for him, does she even remember what he looks like? Would she be able to pick him out of a crowd?
So it's a similar concept to like Atonement as well, where spoilers for Atonement, a fantastic movie if anyone hasn't seen it, where Keira Knightley's character and what's Professor X's name? I'm blanking on his name now. Not Patrick Stewart, the other one.
Not McFadden. What's his name?
McAvoy, James McAvoy. Thank you. Like,
McAvoy.
you got me there.
So many Maccas.
But Keira Knightley and James McAvoy, they have actually been dead, and we're actually viewing a lot of the more upbeat portions of the emotional story through Keira Knightley's in-movie sister writing a novel about their romance. And it's literally her atonement for causing them to have to separate because of something that she did when she was younger.
But like, it's something that you wouldn't, as a non-anime enthusiast, expect in a film. Like
I think that is.
You say anime, you think
Dragon Ball Z. You think of bombastic nonsense.
Well, but yeah, right. You think of stuff like that. So yeah, I think the bubblegum terminology you use is perfect for it as well. That's something else you kind of expect.
So any last thoughts on this film other than the fact that like we really enjoyed it, and I think deep inside of us there's like a big softie who just wants a romantic story and wants to see the happy ending, and maybe the ending isn't necessarily happy, but it doesn't leave you frustrated that the story hasn't been completed. Like, there is, a full circle closure to the film. It might not be the thing that you wanted, but it doesn't leave you dissatisfied.
It's very one of your favorite terms, Antonio, avant-garde. It's one of those movies, it's one of those stories that the story transcends what it's showing you on screen, because it does have real world applications as well as a satisfying internal narrative to the story. So the fact that as she's passing away, she's having one more moment with the documentarian where she says the plot of the movie outright, but it's still very poignant and well done, where she just says, it was the chase that is what kept me going. It was the idea of finding him. It wasn't necessarily him, but it was the idea of getting there. And I mean, it
was the idea of him and being with him is what kept her going, is what it seems like.
Yeah. And now she's moving into the great beyond to continue her search, which I thought was absolutely beautiful. Like, for a movie that
very poetic.
That closing shot of her essentially transcending, but using like the movie footage from her little fantasy that she's been describing, was absolutely incredible. I loved that moment. And it's funny to me because like when we talked about Your Name last year on this episode, we were talking about like what directors could handle that story and not screw it up if they were to do a live action remake. And I mentioned Michel Gondry on that one, and I'm going to say it again. Like, Michel Gondry, who did Eternal Sunshine, I feel would be like the perfect guy to do this, because he is an expert in blending fantastical elements with realistic ones, and that's what this whole movie is. And Tim Burton, like if he did the big fish, maybe. But I also think he would make it too weird, like he'd make it too stylish.
I think he'd lean in. Yeah, I think he'd lean into it,
You need someone that can really pull off the earnestness of it too. Like there is a genuine idea behind the emotion behind some of this, and the nuance is something that just it can't be overstated into how important that is for the story. So you need someone that can understand and deliver on nuance as well as subtext. I don't know that Tim Burton can do that anymore. I don't know if he ever actually could. To me, he's always very surface level. I mean, Big Fish is fantastic. That's one of my favorite like father-son movies ever made. But it does still feel very surface level because at some point they eventually tell you the point of the stories. They tell you the point of everything, and because Tim Burton just is not that guy that lets you sit and dwell on something. He's like, he's
too busy being Tim Burton to take a step back and just be a good storyteller. Awesome.
Exactly.
Well, let's move on to the next one. Slade. This was something.
Slade brought the action this time.
Yeah, I did bring the action in this time. I do like that all these stories have a lot of dark elements that we, movies, not stories, but that we watched for this. I like that there's no discussion between the three of us, but we all came with somewhat of the same movie, tonal wise, between the darkness and a little bit of a love story wrapped in there.
Yeah.
So Jujutsu Kaisen 0, like I said earlier, it's a prequel movie. My idea in doing this was, again, to see if I could get the anime bug to bite Antonio and see if he's now going to be willing to watch 2 seasons of an anime.
I mean, I still have to watch Attack on Titan because you talk about it in every goddamn episode.
Yes, definitely need to watch Attack on Titan. That's the one that like you need to live stream as you're watching. We need to see those reactions. That's one of those shows where the person who refers you to that show should be allowed to somehow be able to sit next to you and just like just sit there and just wait for those moments.
Right?
Did you see it? No.
It's just fun to do. It's just fun. But so Jujutsu Kaisen 0, like I said, it's a prequel movie. You really don't need to watch any of the series before watching the movie. Everything's really laid out and explained pretty well versus, having to go through like 2 or 3 episodes of a story training arc where they grind in how everything works in the world. It's a fun action movie starring really 2 main characters, Yuta Okatsu and Rika Orimoto. Their young love, I guess major spoilers with the way that she gets killed. She gets cursed by Yuta, who wants to save her but can't. And it's sad, but she ends up haunting him as a curse. She's considered a special grade curse, which means she's like top of the list, big bad guy is what that would normally mean. But he can use her to his advantage in fighting and defeating evil curse users.
Okay, beautiful romance story there too. Like it broke me when you see what happens to her in their young love. And I was like, oh my God, Slade's going to just kill me with the sads right now in this movie. And then the fact that she becomes a curse attached to him so they can stay together. It is so sweetly romantic, yet like devastating at the same time, because she doesn't really pop out unless he absolutely needs her. It kind of reminds me of like, what's that movie? Lady Hawk, where they only pass each other for a few seconds. Like she's a hawk during the day and he's a wolf at night and they never meet. That's kind of how this is, where it's like he can't really just talk to her. He can't really be connected with her unless there's danger. And that's kind of like the beauty of the storytelling. And that's the part that got me. The curse wielders and like these demon hunter kids at this high school. I mean, it's got the Harry Potter at high school for special curse hunters and demon hunters or whatever. So cliche, but I liked it. I liked the characters it brought. But that's the part of the story that really got me. That's what kept me in the movie.
I want to explain what Rika kind of is, because I know you're sitting here surface level. I know she looks very sweet and innocent. She's anything but. So with her, she's an archetype called a Yandere. And this is somebody who it happens to a lot of like female characters in anime, and this type it's an archetype of women where like they love someone so much that like if someone else, even their own family, talks to them, they might go, stab somebody about it. Which you do kind of see with Rika a bit, because she won't let anybody touch Yuta or harm him in any way. Now, it's not confirmed, but it's talked about in the manga, which doesn't make it to the movie, unfortunately, that Rika's mother died suddenly when she was 5 for unknown reasons. Before she started elementary school, her and her father got lost in the woods, and only she was found. And her grandmother, Rika's grandmother, blames Rika for her father's death. She also stole that engagement ring from her grandmother.
Okay, I was wondering where the ring came from. They don't really explain that in the movie.
No. So this is one of those things that's lost. The other thing is that Yuta has a younger sister. Rika was friendly to her, but like once she became a curse, Yuta can't go see his sister anymore because she'll be in danger from Rika.
Gotcha.
So it's not all sweet and innocent as it appears. But I will say, I think my highlight was getting a message from you that just said the panda talks. I think anybody's watching.
There's a panda.
Yeah, and that's pretty much it. There's a couple other things. Josh, you should be familiar with Studio Mappa, who did the animation from this.
They did the last season of Attack on Titan,
Chainsaw Man. Yeah.
Which this got a lot of Chainsaw Man vibes for me, having just recently watched that.
Yeah, the other thing is the author of this and the author of Attack on Titan are like good buddies. So if you want to know for the emotional damaging roller coaster you're in for, if you keep watching it, hey, that's
well, it's
up to you.
Yeah, this has a kinetic energy that the others two don't. And the more modern anime I think has this, where everything is just like super fast, super high frame rate. The action scenes are just they're impulsive and nonstop. There's a lot of cool like swish pans, like comic. I feel like I'm watching a live action comic book as opposed to watching like a graphic novel unfold with like the other films. But the action scenes in this were just absolutely mind blowing. And I like how the curses, I'm trying hard not to call them demons, like, because they feel like demons, but they're curses in like a manifested form. They remind me of, since it's out in theaters, the old Ghostbusters cartoon, where the ghosts are large and bulbous and almost kind of fluffy and furry looking, yet intimidating and ferocious at the same time. Like some of those big ones that come out with the big eyeballs, it's like, oh, that looks so cuddly. And then it has teeth and fangs and tentacles. It's like, oh shit. Like I loved that whole part of it.
Yeah, there's like there's like a big fight at the end because, well, there has to be in this movie. And like you're talking about, there's like this huge one on the street and you're like, that looks kind of cute. And then it just eats somebody. You're like, oh, well, never mind.
It does suffer, in my opinion, because I'm not really indoctrinated in this stuff. I had character fatigue. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of characters that show up in the series or were in the manga, especially in that third act, where I kind of became accustomed to the characters that we built up with at this school, this Tokyo Jujutsu Technical High, which is essentially, like I said, Harry Potter. It's what's the name of the school in Harry Potter? Hogwarts.
Jujutsu High.
It's the Hogwarts for these curse hunters. But I love how there's also kind of like an X-Men feel to it, right? Like you have the guy who has to keep the bandages over his eyes. You have the guy that has like the curse voice, so he can only speak the ingredients of ramen bowls or something. And that I thought was hilarious. He's like, salmon roe.
Yeah, so that's all he can say, because if he says anything else, then that will happen to whoever he says it to, which that's an ability I could not be trusted.
Yeah, there has to be, even without context, if he says the wrong thing to someone, like he curses them or something happens to them. I will say that I really enjoyed this. I thought it was a lot of fun, but I mostly really just enjoyed the action beats, only because I feel like they tried to encapsulate a lot of episodes or a lot of tones and themes from different episodes of the show into one movie. So there's kind of tonal whiplash, because the first time we are introduced to our main character is this really dark and just gloomy scene. And then the very next scene, we have we're introduced to like Jubilee and the other young X-Men team, and they're just having fun talking to a giant panda. And I'm like, whoa, what?
Right.
That's not what I just saw like for a 2 or 3 minute scene here. Now we're talking to a giant panda, and some guy's just saying salmon every other word.
Yeah.
What's
like,
happening
it started
here?
It started off for me to have like Death Note vibes, right? Like I thought that's the direction it was going.
Yeah, so I feel like it is
Right.
trying to be a little bit of an entryway for people like me and Antonio who have not seen this show, and be like, these are the different things we get to do in this show, and here's some themes, but they do it in such a rushed way that it is kind of tonal whiplash, because you go from one scene where we're getting exposition about why talking salmon kid can't say real words, and we're getting all this from a talking panda, and then we're also going into talking about why Rika is so dangerous, and there's a guy who is basically Magneto who has left the school, and he's like, I'm going to destroy the world, and we're going to get all the other curses to help us.
Yeah, that guy's name is Gato, by the way. He's like at the moment, for what you two would know, he's the big overarching villain. At one time, he was actually a student at Jujutsu High.
Well, yeah, they show a
guy
little
with
flashback of him and the main guy back in the day.
Yeah. So the guy with the bandages on it, his name is Gojo. They were best friends when they were in school together.
Magneto and Professor X.
And
Right, like yeah.
Yeah, and so they at one time they were best friends, and that last little sword slash you hear in the movie is not Gojo, sorry, Gato dying. I get their names confused because there's not many letters between it, but you have to do that to your own best friend in the end, which is sad. Season 2 of Jujutsu Kaisen has a more prequel where you get to see the two of them in school and how they were as best friends together, and it makes that scene in the movie even more heartbreaking.
I mean, I liked this movie a lot. I liked the action. I liked the fun characters to it. And even though I could tell it was meant to be a series, it never not felt like a movie to me. I felt like I was watching a first, second, third act complete story that could be led onto something else. I think the part that I had the hardest time with is that I just did not care for the dub and the characterization of Yuta. I get it. Rika was attached to him. I mean, she tried to lock him down at age 10 or whatever, put an engagement ring on him, like in the playground, essentially. But it's one of those things kind of like Harry Potter too, where you're not necessarily maybe supposed to like the main character as much as you are the people who are trying to help him on his journey. And that's where this worked for me. It's like everyone that was trying to help this guy, even though they don't really like him at first, they eventually like, well, he's one of us and we're going to protect him. That was the only real problem I had with the movie, is like, oh, this guy is just the worst. How does she like him? But they do fix it with a twist. I'm not going to give that twist away, but when they actually find like the revelation of why she is a curse, I was like, okay, they kind of fixed my dismay of this character through the story, and I'm always going to give high marks to a film that can do that. Even if it's like a throwaway line, it does it.
That part where they revealed all that was really well done, and it did not feel like it was out of place. It didn't feel like it didn't feel like it was one of those things where they were just like, we need a resolution to this that makes everyone happy. It feels like something that was very clearly set up from the beginning. There's little breadcrumbs, but they're not big enough that you're going to be like, oh, that's it. Okay, let's move on.
They didn't last Skywalker it or whatever, Rise of Skywalker it. Yeah.
Somehow Rika has returned.
Right. Well,
yeah, no, I enjoyed this a lot.
But good. Well, that was the whole point. I'm glad y'all enjoyed it. But Antonio, you have to answer the question. Is this going to get
Did
you
it
to go
bite
watch
me?
Jujutsu Kaisen?
I will definitely give it another shot. I'll definitely jump into the series and see if I can stick with it. I mean, you've given me so much homework. You've given me Attack on Titan. You've given me...
You've had a year to watch it, Antonio. That's not like you have 12 podcasts.
It sounds like you need... It sounds like what you should do is do Attack on Titan and then transition after like a week of being very, very sad to go into Jujutsu Kaisen and let that lift your spirits a little bit.
Well, lift your spirits for one season, then be sad.
Yeah, what I should be doing is doing what all of like the teenagers and 20 somethings that work for me do is watch anime on their lunch break on their phone. That's what they all do. They're all in the break room watching anime. I should start doing that. So,
I mean, I watched Attack on Titan in almost all of its entirety during the pandemic, working from home on my tablet. Just had it underneath me, had my monitors, and
there you go.
I hit my goals. I hit my marks. So, you know, good for me.
Yeah, that's how I end up watching a lot of stuff. Like I'll be on site in my work truck, but I have that little like wireless phone charger holder thing, and if you see my phone in there sideways, I'm probably watching that.
There you go. No, I like this a lot. Okay, so the one I brought to the table, I brought the dark one. I think Josh thought he brought the dark one. I brought the dark one. This one I was really excited for when it came out. I saw it right when it came out on VHS back in like the Hollywood Video Blockbuster days, because it was made by the guy that wrote Ghost in the Shell, and at that time that was like my anime movie. That's the movie for me, you know. Super influential. A lot of people say it influenced The Matrix, which I agree with, and other things like that. So my movie is JIN-ROH, The Wolf Brigade. And first of all, I am a sucker for alternative history. Like, I love those movies and books about alternate history. You know, what if the Nazis won the war? What if the Japanese won the war? I love that shit. And that's kind of what this is that this is an alternate take on history and what Japanese society looked like after World War II. And here's the thing is I haven't watched this movie since it came out in 2000 or 2001. And it just blows my mind how I keep watching these old movies about future dystopian societies and how relevant they seem to the shit that goes on today. And so I'm going to say that this movie hit me even more than it did the first time, because I feel like we're dealing with stuff like this, where we have the government, but then we also have the government. And then we have political activists, but then we also have political activists. And there will never be a perfect harmony in the society because everyone is just trying to outdo the other. And that's essentially what the point and story of this movie is. Was this a first time for either of you guys, or have you seen them before?
I've not seen this before, but when I was recording the Anime Corner the other day, I mentioned I was watching this, and my two co-hosts got very excited. So I knew I had like high marks. Plus, Antonio recommended it, so can't be bad.
What about you, Skaar?
This is definitely my first time, and I anytime you suggest anything, I go in with high hopes, because I'm like, it's gonna make me think, it's gonna make me feel something, and it's just gonna be something worth watching in one way, shape, or another.
Right. So the story essentially is we're in an alternate history where the Nazis have won World War II, and Japan is going through its own kind of militarized state, where to get people back in order, they create this essential super force of these guys with this awesome armor, these scary masks, and these just giant machine guns that essentially... Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. A little bit of a, so in my spare time, little that I have, I do collect firearms. This movie, by the way, is a spotting like fun game. I was just like taking note, like, oh, that's that, that's this, that's that. When I saw the gun you're talking about is a MG42, if you have like the balls to stand there and hold one of those things, like the stand that those normally use weighs like a good 35 pounds.
Right.
And you've made a suit that somebody can stand there and use it. I'm like, holy shit.
Right. I mean, these guys are essentially like the shock troopers from Star Wars, right? Like they are just the ultimate force, but this is like 1940s, 1950s technology. And so they kind of get society back in order. And the cool thing about the story is that they no longer need this paramilitary group, but the paramilitary group still exists. They've just gone underground, as have all the other political activist groups. So it seems like a society at ease, but at the same time, things keep bubbling up from the surface, because who's going to take control of this Tokyo now, essentially? So that's how I feel what we're seeing these days, when we have like far right and far left and QAnon people. And then you see you guys are in the Midwest region. I'm right below Idaho, where we've got all these crazy militias that are just building up all of these supplies of weaponry and stuff like that. And some say they're government funded and shadow funded. Like, that's what it feels like when I hear these stories on the news, And then we're watching a movie like this. I'm like, oh shit, like this was fantasy for me 20 years ago. And now it feels like it's kind of echoing what I'm seeing on the news these days. And that's where like the story kind of comes into play, where we have this guy, his name's Fuse, right? And he is one of these shock troopers. And as they're putting down one of these riots, he comes across a girl in the sewer who has a bomb in a bag. And rather than be taken prisoner, she ignites the bomb to try and kill everyone that she can. And the last thing he sees before she blows up is her face and her eyes, and he cannot shake the face and the eyes. And so it becomes like this, almost like Millennium Actress, this obsession with something that he doesn't even know, but it's there. And that's what kind of drives his character along as he's looking for more about her and her past and her history. But this movie also turns into a conspiracy movie because there's more at play to who she is and who they introduce her to, where when you think you're starting off with a war movie and a political movie, it turns into like a psychological thriller because now people's minds are being messed with and their direction and their course in life are being messed with. So it's one of those movies that it's playing on so many different levels, and it's not funny. It's not enlightening. It's not entertaining. It's dark. But like a good Christopher Nolan movie, it just keeps you intrigued the whole time with twist after twist.
This felt very like Fahrenheit 451 Equilibrium for the first half of the movie, maybe the first even 2/3 of the movie. Those were kind of the vibes I was getting, where me and my Western philosophy of everything needs a happy ending.
Right.
So,
sorry, we're in Kafka-esque universe now.
Yeah. So I'm sitting here being like, okay, this is Equilibrium. He's going to see the light and he's going to maybe sacrifice himself because it is anime. So you need a darker ending. And I'm just sitting here thinking, hypothesizing, what are the influences? What are these things? Like, these are the things that I'm connecting to, but obviously Equilibrium, it did not come out when this movie came out. Right. But Fahrenheit 451 was there. So maybe there's like a turn that's happening where he's going to turn and help society and realize that the oppression and the dystopian future that or world that he's living in is not what he thought it was. And he's not serving the purpose that he thought he was. And that's not this movie at all, because once you get to that final third, or even just the final like 10 minutes, like, holy cow, does this movie goes into that dark realm that really only anime ever really can go into.
Agreed. Same with the violence, man. Like the violence and the gore of this movie, while hyper stylized, it kind of reminds me of the violence we see in the anime segments of Kill Bill, right? It's very, very stylized gore, but like Slade was saying, there's something about the mechanics of this movie when it comes to the firepower, the guns, the way they lock and load and do magazine changes. It feels real. It sounds real. Like the sound design in this movie, top notch, because I was immersed and it's a cartoon.
Yeah. So someone who did that part of it they knew what they were doing, is what I would say. Because a lot of times, you see that and it's like, it's like when you watch musicians in like an anime or anything else, and you can tell when they're not actually playing their instrument. Right. It's like way too off. Somebody knew what they were doing. But let me tell you, that ending, I was not ready for it.
Right.
I was not ready for it. There's this, as the movie runs on, what we haven't talked about is Red Riding Hood.
I was gonna bring it up, but you do it. You're there.
Oh yeah, it's brought up constantly, and the whole time you think the main character, he is the big bad wolf, but he's Red Riding Hood all along. That twist, Antonio, I was not ready for. Genuinely, I was genuinely not ready for, especially when they were out there in the field. I was ready for that just to be like, I don't want to spoil it because I would love for people to go watch it, and I don't want to spoil it.
You don't have to spoil it. Like, I think we've already kind of explained that your baser instincts of what the plot is and what these characters are not correct. But the fact that they use, I love it when you can use a fairy tale or a children's tale as your analogy for the movie. And at first it just kind of sounds like they're just spouting something, we're being philosophical here, and we're playing with your childhood fantasies of, like, we're going to make something innocent like Little Red Riding Hood or a fairy tale into something more dark and disturbing on a geopolitical level. And it does that, but the fact that it carries that theme throughout the entire movie, and then it really gives you the full message at the end, and it makes it feel so obvious when really it's not. Like, you weren't expecting it, and then when it happens, you're like, oh my God, like that is exactly what it was. And they used this little childhood story to kind of carry you along with it.
And to Josh's point, there's so many times where you're like, oh, this will have a happy ending. And, you know, where they're talking about, oh, we should go run away, but we can't.
Yeah.
I would love to go see that other town over there,
But we can't.
Yeah. And it's like, it does mislead you, and it does a very, very good job of misleading you. And kept me on the edge of my seat watching, to be honest.
It does make me really wonder how different Western audiences view movies and like what they go in expecting. Cause like Grave of the Fireflies is one that I will never get over, because that was one of the first anime that I remember being like, when is the happy happen?
Right.
And this is kind of one of those movies too, where it like you can see where they want to get your psyche going, because at least as a Western audience viewer, we always build towards the happy ending where there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. But in this movie, the light shuts off and it never comes back on, but they make you think that it has. It's a weird concept that I really would love to just know what it is like for Asian audiences, Japanese audiences, to know what they go into their movies expecting. Cause like even Godzilla -1, it's a happy ending, but it's a false happy ending, because there are other things that happen at the end where it's like, that's a little dark, but we won. The guys won.
We won, right?
So,
Did we?
so I'm curious. I would, that's one of those things that I can never know, because my perspective is never going to be that of a Japanese person that has been raised on Japanese cinema. So that's one thing I would just love to know is like, do they always just go into these movies just knowing they're going to come out saccharine? Or is it something where they're like, American movies always have that happy ending, which is why they always come to our stuff and we get such big box office returns. Like I want to know what drives their box office in that psyche sense.
Well, this might be a question for Slade, because I feel like from the late 80s to the early 2000s, there was a strong sense of nihilism in anime and animated films. Like when you look at the Pat Labor movies, and when you think about this film and even Akira, you know, there was like a dark phase where nothing was happy. And then I just call it the Digimon phase, where it's like all of a sudden people were more excited about like spiky hair and fun monsters and things like that. I'm not saying these films go away, but they had an era, and this film kind of fits right in the middle of that era of like the nihilistic part of it. Like, am I off base there, or?
No, you're not. And we've kind of, so what happened really is that there's a transition in artists and authors.
Yeah.
And then, so that's where that generation you're talking about, where it's like spiky hair, happy, fun. But those authors, as they started, it seems like they explored and, you know, learned about what things were like, things slowly start taking that darker turn back again. And you can see the influence of these things, you know, as it's progressed. Because now, like, a lot of the top animes are dark and depressing,
or emotionally gripping, like the
on
Suzume and the Your Name guy. Yeah. The last thing I want to say about this, though, really fast, is I like how this movie does what a lot of movies fail at, and I think Steven Spielberg did a pretty good job with it in Munich, where are there bad guys and are there good guys, or is everyone bad but they think they're good? Like, everyone's fighting for a cause and everyone thinks their cause is right. So our perception of good could be evil to the other party. And I think that's something that we don't get a lot of in our stories and our mainstream films and novels, is that duality aspect, right? I think it's just people don't want to see that because they want someone to root for and someone to hate. But this movie really encapsulates like how, is there a good guy, or are we all just bad? You know?
Well, I think it's more so like, you know, everybody, and you look at this on, you know, Twitter, your social media, whatever, everybody wants to either be like, oh, they're right, oh, I'm wrong. But that's like, you know, that's the end of it. Nobody wants the gray space nuance that life truly is.
Right.
We get a lot of workarounds with that sort of thing, because there's like a character that does the wrong thing for the right reason.
Right.
And one of the biggest ones that always comes to mind when I have that phrase is in the Netflix version of Voltron, which I would recommend as well. That's done. The animation is done by the same studio that did Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Oh, okay.
It's a really good series. I recommend it. The ending is kind of but in the final season, there's a moment where Team Voltron is back on Earth that has been invaded by alien forces, and there's an Earth general who just wants to save Earth, and the alien forces want Voltron. So she helps lure Voltron to the alien forces, and there's a whole sequence that happens, but then she gets betrayed because she did the wrong thing for what she thought was the right reason. So like, I feel like that's what at least Western audiences do to get around that. They introduce a character that makes that bad choice that the heroes won't have to make.
Yeah.
It's something that they could do. It's something that should be in their option bag, but someone else is going to make that choice, and they're going to suffer the consequences for it, because the way Western audiences expect those stories to go is someone who betrays someone, the only way they can redeem themselves that way is via death, or a noble death, or sacrificing themselves, whatever it may be. But they can't be redeemed otherwise. So they do the wrong thing for the right reasons, and then they immediately die once they redeem themselves.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I think at least Western audiences and modern audiences, we get around that idea of who's right, who's the bad guy, who do we root for in this situation. Dune 2, I talked about that, where in my show, we did the review, and I said, I don't feel good rooting for Paul anymore. Like there's a revenge story that we can get behind, but then all of a sudden there's this weird messianic prophecy thing that he's manipulating, and it no longer feels like the good guy versus the bad guy story. Now he's manipulating people to fight a holy war for him that they have no interest in, other than the fact that they think he is a messiah figure. And it turns out that Frank Herbert, who wrote this series of Dune, he created the book Dune Messiah because people misinterpreted his message of the Messiah prophecy is a bad thing.
Yeah, right.
No. Sometimes I just get enthralled listening to y'all talk.
I think this was a great lineup of films this year. And I can't say that it topped last year because they're all so different. They're all so different than the year before. So like, I'd tell my listeners, go back and listen to last year's, watch those movies, and then watch these ones and see that we're not all just hooked on the same type of film. You know, I thought I was going to bring like the dark one, and you guys are going to bring some bubbly stuff. But in a way, we all were kind of thinking on the same timeline. Like Slade said, we didn't even talk to each other about these movies until we posted them. And I hadn't heard of either of yours except for Millennium Actress. But yeah, that's great conversation, great movies. And I would suggest all three of these. Like I trust you guys. There wasn't a bad one in the bunch. So again, like I think we're doing the Lord's work here.
Yeah, it was a ton of fun as always. You know, these are two movies that otherwise I feel like they would have slipped under my radar, but you know, it was a tremendous time.
Well, and Millennium Actress and JIN-ROH are on Tubi, so anyone can watch those. And then please pronounce it for me because I'm terrible at pronouncing this one, Slade.
Jujutsu Kaisen.
Jujutsu Kaisen's on Crunchyroll, and you don't have to start with the movie, but you can.
Yes, you can watch season 1, the movie, and then season 2 because that's how it was released. But if you're wanting to see what it's really about, just watch the movie. It's important. It actually kind of helps season 1 to know because, well, it's important to know Yuta because he's talked about a lot, but he's off on a special mission during season 1, so you don't actually get to see him. But he's like name dropped constantly.
Awesome. Well, people, if you enjoyed this episode, we've actually had several episodes throughout the years on different people's shows. So like, for example, we discussed Suzume on Talking Smack. And then I recently was on Between Two Pods on Slade's show. And then Skaar and I are always kind of jumping back and forth, or at least mentioning each other on their shows. The Godzilla -1 episode was a lot of fun because you guys got me back in the theater because I hadn't been in the theater for a while to go catch that one. But yeah, if you enjoyed this conversation, go back to Talking Smack, Between Two Pods, and that's on the Game Club feed, right? And hear us talk about stuff then, and then take out last year's episode of Cult-Worthy Anime. It was a lot of fun too. So this comes out in a couple weeks, so we're pretty close to the timeline. Skaar, what have you got coming up on Talking Smack?
We just finished, literally before we recorded this episode, we recorded our Ghostbusters episode. We are coming up on our 150th episode, so we are taking suggestions for our next Talking Smackdowns episode, and we're giving away a copy, a Steam edition copy of Marvel Midnight Suns for anyone who suggests a fight. They'll get entered into a pool, and we'll just do a wheel of names, and we'll draw a name on that episode as well. So if you want to email us a Talking Smackdown suggestion, you can email us at tsmackpod@gmail.com, or you can find us on social medias everywhere. We're at Talking Smack Pod, and Smack is SMAC.
This is actually episode 150 of mine that we're recording right now. So you and I are like, we're right there holding hands. Slade, what's up in your world? You got so many.
Oh, I got so much to talk about. So, hi, I'm Slade from the Game Club Pod. You can find me at pretty much everywhere Slade plays games, except Instagram. So that's Slade's life. Currently, over at the Game Club Pod, if you're interested in that, we are going to be talking about Buckshot Roulette. It's a lovely little indie game. Have you seen this through the zeitgeist of the internet algorithms?
No.
So, you obviously know what Russian roulette is. It's that, but with the shotgun, and it's you and a dealer, and you're playing odds, essentially.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's a wild concept, and there's like little challenges in it. It's really cool. We have that going on. We started a new little sub-series called DLC, which is when one of us wants to talk about a game that the other two aren't interested in. You know, little solo episode. We have the anime corner. Once a month, we talk about a different anime. This one coming up, we did Girls Last Tour, which again, you know, Antonio, you're talking about things that are going to hurt your heart. That's definitely one that's going to keep you on your toes. Other than that, there's also two blokes from Blighty. Joey and Tim have their own show. They just like to shoot the shit for an hour once a week. It's actually really funny, to be honest. And then between two pods, you should go back and listen to Antonio's episode. I also had Josh on and all of Talking Smack. That's a long episode, though, so good luck if you get through it.
And also, I have to mention my friend Dan's podcast, Casting Views. He just had Slade on, and that was a great concept about mind wiping. If you could go back in time and re-experience a movie again without knowing the ending, or a song, or a concert. I loved that concept. I'm kind of pissed off that I wasn't on that episode, but I'll handle him later.
Oh, goodness. Antonio, what if you could wipe your mind from one of these movies we've suggested, which one would you like to experience for the first time?
Of just these three, or all the ones we've talked about?
Let's say all six that we've
Your Name, 100%. I would love to go back.
Your Name for me, too.
Yeah, I'd go back and re-experience that for the first time, 100%.
That one.
So all I've realized is I got to top Your Name next time we come back around to April.
That's hard. That's hard, because I was hoping someone would do it with this one. But man, Your Name still to this very day just shakes me. Awesome. Well, everyone, they've told you where you can find them, but always look on my cultworthy.com page of Cultworthy Partners. You can find links to everyone I've ever had on the show. It's an easy way to find them without having to search for all the socials. And please rate, review, follow, like, subscribe to all of our shows. We love it. We love seeing those reviews and those ratings. And share the love. Get more listeners. Get more people onto our shows. Good people right here, trust me. So
Can I just? I started this new joke with Talking Smack for our reviews. All you have to do for a Talking Smack review is say, "Would you have preferred to have watched Madam Web or listen to us?" That's all I want the review to be. Would prefer to listen to this than watch Madam Web. That's all I want the review to be.
Love it. All right, everyone. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, and we'll see you next week.